The message came just after midnight, lighting up Daniel Mercer's phone while the rest of the house slept. He had been half awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to the steady rhythm of his wife's breathing beside him. When the screen buzzed, he frowned. No one ever messaged him this late. He picked up the phone, careful not to wake Clara, and read the first line. "You don't know me, but you deserve to know the truth." His heart skipped. The words felt heavy, deliberate. He sat up slowly, his back cold against the headboard, and opened the message thread. The next messages followed quickly, as if the sender had been waiting for this moment. Screenshots filled the screen. Conversations, familiar names. Familiar. Words twisted into unfamiliar meanings. Daniel's fingers tightened around the phone as he scrolled. There was no confusion, no room for doubt. The messages were clear. Clara, Marcus, his wife, and his closest friend. Planning meetings that had nothing to do with work. Sharing jokes that used to belong only to Daniel. Talking about feelings that should never have existed between them. The room felt smaller, the air felt thin. Daniel stood and walked to the bathroom, closing the door softly behind him. He leaned over the sink, staring at his reflection. His face looked calm, almost blank, but his eyes were different. Something behind them had cracked. He read the messages again, slower this time, hoping his mind had misunderstood. It hadn't. Dates matched days he remembered clearly. Late nights. At the office. Business trips Marcus insisted on joining. Times Clara had said she was too tired to talk. A memory surfaced without warning. Marcus standing in this very house months ago, laughing, raising a glass, calling Daniel his brother. Clara smiling beside them, her hand resting lightly on Daniel's arm. The image now felt false, like a scene from a play he had mistaken for real life. Daniel returned to the bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed. Clara shifted slightly but didn't wake. He watched her for a long moment. She looked peaceful, trusting. The thought made his chest tighten. He wondered how long she had looked at him this way while hiding something so carefully. He wondered if she felt any guilt at all. The phone buzzed again. Another message from the unknown sender. "I couldn't stay quiet anymore. I'm sorry." Daniel didn't reply. He didn't know what to say. His words felt useless. He turned the phone off and sat there until morning. Listening to the house come alive with distant sounds, feeling like a stranger in his own life. By sunrise, Daniel had made one decision. He would not confront them. Not yet. Anger was rising, but beneath it was something colder and sharper. He needed to understand the full shape of the betrayal. He needed to see how deep it went. At breakfast, Clara moved around the kitchen as usual, making coffee, talking about her plans for the day. Her voice was steady, normal. Daniel watched her closely, searching for cracks in her performance. There were none. She kissed his cheek before leaving, just like every other morning. Daniel stood still long after the door closed, the warmth of the kiss lingering like a lie. At the office, Marcus greeted him with a wide smile and an easy handshake. "Big day," Marcus said, already talking about numbers, deals, the future they were building together. Daniel listened, nodded, played his part. Inside, every word felt sharp. Marcus looked confident, relaxed. If he felt guilt, he hid it well. That realization hurt more than Daniel expected. Throughout the day, Daniel moved fast. He buried himself in work, responding to emails, attending meetings, making decisions with a clarity that surprised even him. Pain had narrowed his focus. Every task felt urgent, controlled. He needed control. It was the only thing keeping him steady. As the hours passed, pieces began to fall into place. Small moments from the past took on new meaning. Marcus insisting on handling certain clients alone. Clara becoming distant, distracted. Late-night calls that ended too quickly when Daniel entered the room. The betrayal had not been sudden. It had been careful, planned, hidden in plain sight. That night, Daniel sat alone in his study, the lights low, the house quiet. He reopened the message thread and read everything again, this time without shaking hands. He noted details, dates, locations, patterns. He didn't cry, didn't shout. Instead, he felt a steady pressure building inside him, like a storm gathering strength. He thought about Marcus, about their history. They had built the company together from nothing. Long nights, shared risks, shared failures. Daniel had trusted him without question. He had defended him when others doubted him. He had given him opportunities he never would have had alone. And this was how Marcus repaid him. Daniel also thought about Clara. He had loved her deeply, openly. He had believed in honesty, in loyalty, in building a life together. Now he wondered, when that love had become something else to her, when she had decided he was no longer enough. A single question echoed in his mind. Why? Not out of weakness, but out of a need to understand. People didn't betray like this without reasons, even if those reasons were selfish. Over the next few days, Daniel observed quietly. He watched how Marcus spoke to Clara during work events. Subtle glances, brief smiles that vanished when noticed. Clara avoided Daniel's eyes more often now, though she covered it with forced affection. The tension between them was invisible to others, but loud to him. One evening, Daniel stayed late. At the office on purpose. He told Clara not to wait up. From his glass-walled office, he watched Marcus down the hall, talking on his phone, his voice low. When Marcus finished, Daniel noticed how quickly his confident posture faded, replaced by something closer to worry. For the first time, Daniel saw a crack. That night, Marcus sent Daniel a message. "We should talk soon, about the company's future." Daniel stared at the screen for a long time before replying. "Anytime," he wrote. Simple, neutral. Marcus responded. With a thumbs-up emoji, Daniel almost laughed. As days turned into a week, Daniel's anger sharpened into resolve. He stopped asking whether the betrayal was real. He stopped hoping for explanations. Instead, he focused on what came next, began gathering information quietly, not just about the affair, but about the business. He reviewed accounts, old contracts, decisions Marcus had pushed for. He noticed irregularities he had once ignored out of trust. The more Daniel uncovered, the clearer one truth became. Marcus had not only betrayed him personally, he had taken advantage of Daniel's trust professionally. The realization hit harder than the messages ever had. This wasn't just about love or loyalty. It was about being used. At home, the distance between Daniel and Clara grew heavier. Conversations became shorter, silences longer. She sensed the shift, but didn't understand it or pretended not to. Daniel watched her carefully, wondering if she felt safe because she believed he knew nothing, or because she believed she was justified. Late one night, Daniel stood by the window, looking out at the quiet street. He felt tired in a way sleep couldn't fix. He thought about confrontation, about shouting, about demanding answers. The image brought no comfort. Instead, another thought took shape. A slower path, a quieter one where he didn't lose himself to rage. The betrayal had taken something from him, but it had also revealed something important. Daniel realized he no longer wanted apologies. He wanted truth. He wanted balance. And he wanted to decide on his own terms how this story would end. As he turned away from the window, his phone buzzed again. This time, it was a message from Marcus. "I owe you everything," it read. "I hope you know that." Daniel stared at the words, feeling the weight of their irony. He placed the phone face down on the table and took a deep breath. The first part of the truth was clear now. The people closest to him had broken his trust. What came next would test not only his strength, but the kind of man he chose to be. Daniel did not rush his next move. He learned to live inside the silence. Every morning he woke with a tight chest and a clear goal. Stay calm, stay observant, stay in control. Anger was still there, but it no longer burned. It focused him. He moved through his days with purpose, watching, listening, remembering. The betrayal had changed how he saw the world, and now every detail mattered. At work, Daniel became sharper. He arrived early and stayed late, reviewing reports he once trusted. Marcus to handle. He noticed patterns he had ignored before. Small money shifts. Delays explained to Isley. Deals rushed without proper approval. None of it was dramatic on its own, but together it painted a troubling picture. Marcus had been making choices that benefited himself first, using Daniel's trust as cover. Daniel felt a heavy mix of anger and disappointment, but he kept his face calm and his voice steady. Marcus sensed something had changed. He grew more careful around Daniel, choosing his words slowly, offering compliments that sounded rehearsed. He spoke often about loyalty and friendship, as if repeating them might make them true. Daniel responded politely, never revealing what. He knew every conversation felt like a game of balance, one wrong step away from exposure. At home, Clara tried harder. She cooked meals Daniel liked, asked about his day, laughed a little louder than before. The effort felt forced. Daniel noticed how she checked her phone often, how her smiles faded when she thought he wasn't watching. She had not confessed. That hurt more than the betrayal itself. It told him she believed her secret was safe. At night, Daniel lay awake, his thoughts racing. Imagined confronting them both, demanding answers, watching their faces fall. Image brought a moment of relief, followed by emptiness. He realized he didn't want their fear. He wanted understanding. He wanted control over the outcome. Revenge whispered to him in quiet moments, offering satisfaction, promising balance. But another voice questioned the cost. Daniel began to plan slowly and carefully. Key, not out of cruelty, but out of self-respect. He gathered documents, saved copies, and organized timelines. Each piece of evidence felt heavy, like a reminder of how deeply he had been misled. Still, he avoided acting on impulse. He needed the right moment. Marcus, meanwhile, carried his own storm. Guilt pressed on him, though he refused to name it. He told himself the affair was a mistake born from loneliness and ambition. He believed Daniel had taken too much credit, too much control. In his mind, he deserved more than he had received. This belief kept his conscience quiet enough to function. Clara's thoughts were no calmer. She felt torn between comfort and desire, between the life she had and the one she imagined. She justified her silence by telling herself Daniel would never understand. She convinced herself the truth would only cause pain. Yet every time Daniel looked at her, steady and unreadable, her chest tightened with fear. The tension grew as the company's annual gala approached. It was a night meant to celebrate success, but for Daniel, it became a deadline. He knew many eyes would be on him and Marcus. Any move made that night would echo loudly. The thought sharpened his focus. Days before the event, Daniel overheard Marcus speaking to a lawyer on the phone. His voice was low, urgent. Daniel didn't hear everything, but he heard enough to know Marcus was preparing for something. That realization shifted the balance. If Marcus moved first, Daniel could lose control of the narrative. The risk forced Daniel to confront his hesitation. One evening, Daniel reviewed the evidence one last time. His hands were steady, his mind clear. The betrayal was undeniable. The path of revenge was open. Expose Marcus publicly. End the partnership in disgrace. Reveal the affair and watch Clara's world collapse. It was all possible. It was all within reach. But with every plan came a question. What would remain afterward? Would victory feel like relief or like loss? Would he recognize himself in the aftermath? Daniel remembered his father's words from long ago. Power is not in what you take, but in what you choose not to become. The memory stayed with him, heavy and uncomfortable. The night before the gala, Clara finally spoke. Her voice shook as she asked, "Is something wrong?" Daniel looked at her for a long moment. He saw fear in her eyes, mixed with hope. She was waiting for him to speak first, to open the door she was too afraid to touch. Daniel chose silence. He nodded and said he was just tired. The lie tasted bitter, but it gave him time. Sleep came late that night. Daniel dreamed of standing at a crossroads, one path lit by fire, the other fading into shadow. He woke before dawn, heart racing, knowing the decision was near. The day of the gala moved fast. The venue buzzed with preparation. Staff rushed. Music played softly in the background. Daniel dressed carefully, his movements precise. Every step felt like part of a plan, even though the plan was still shifting inside his mind. At the event, Marcus appeared confident, greeting guests, laughing. Isley. But Daniel noticed the tension in his shoulders, the way his eyes searched the room. Clara stayed close to Daniel, her hand resting lightly on his arm. The gesture felt like a performance, meant for others more than for him. As speeches began, Daniel felt time slow. Each word spoken on stage seemed louder than it should be. Marcus was scheduled to speak next to announce a major expansion. Daniel knew this was the moment when attention would peak. If he acted, everyone would hear it. Marcus stepped onto the stage, smiling as applause filled the room. He spoke of partnership, of trust, of shared success. Daniel listened, feeling the weight of every false word. The evidence rested in his pocket, a quiet promise of power. His heart beat fast, but his mind was calm. This was the edge. One step forward would change everything. One step back would change him. As Marcus finished, the room applauded. Daniel stood slowly, drawing attention. Silence spread as eyes turned toward him. Marcus looked relieved at first, then uncertain. Daniel took a breath. In that breath lived every emotion he had. Carried anger, pain, pride, love, loss. He realized something clear and final. Revenge would not heal him. It would only bind him to the betrayal longer. The choice was made not out of weakness, but strength. Daniel walked to the stage, his face calm, his voice steady. What he would say next would decide not only the fate of others, but the shape of his own future. Daniel's footsteps echoed lightly on the polished marble floor as he moved toward the stage. The gala was alive with noise glasses clinking, soft conversations, laughter, but all of it felt distant. He noticed the way Marcus's smile faltered. As Daniel approached, how Clara's hand tightened around his arm for a moment before letting go. Every movement, every glance carried weight. This was the moment he had both feared and anticipated for weeks. The evidence rested in his pocket, neatly organized, ready to expose betrayal and deception. But as he climbed the few steps onto the stage, he realized that true power wasn't in the papers, it was in his choice. Marcus greeted him with a strained, "Daniel, what's this?" His voice held a trace of fear, barely noticeable but sharp enough to slice through the noise of the crowd. Daniel smiled politely, a mask that hid the storm of emotions underneath. "I just wanted to say a few words," he replied, his tone calm, measured, deliberate. Every eye in the room turned to him. Guests leaned forward, sensing the tension, even if they didn't know why. Clara's face was pale, but composed, her eyes flicking between Daniel and Marcus as if reading a secret he hadn't spoken yet. Daniel began. His words were carefully chosen, public, but calm, complimenting Marcus's achievements, highlighting the partnership they had built over years. He spoke of trust, loyalty, and dedication, concepts that now felt hollow in his personal life, but necessary to maintain the appearance of normalcy. The audience nodded politely, applauded in the right places, unaware of the undercurrent running. Beneath the surface, he let Marcus speak next, letting him feel the temporary relief of success, letting the man believe he had won this round. Yet inside, Daniel felt the steady pulse of control. He had prepared for this moment, but he was testing himself as much as him. Marcus launched into his speech, discussing expansion, new opportunities, and innovation. His confidence was precise, practiced, yet Daniel noticed tiny cracks, a stumble over words, a quick glance at the podium papers, the subtle hesitation in his smile. Daniel's mind cataloged each slip, each imperfection, and for a moment, a thrill ran through him, the kind of satisfaction revenge promises. But then he reminded himself that satisfaction built on someone else's fall was hollow. He didn't want that emptiness. Daniel had seen enough over the past weeks to know the real consequences of exposing betrayal in this moment. Marcus would face public humiliation. Clara would be cornered. Reputations damaged, relationships shattered. The crowd would witness only fragments of a story. Justice, in that sense, would be cruel, complete, irreversible. And Daniel had long considered himself a man who measured consequences carefully. He understood the weight of actions and the permanence of words. That understanding held him back. As the applause subsided, Daniel paused. He looked at Marcus directly, the way he had once looked at a friend, a partner, someone he trusted. Marcus flinched slightly under the gaze, a flash of guilt crossing his face. Then Daniel's eyes shifted to Clara. She held herself steady, but her hands betrayed tension. She had hidden her secret long enough to feel safe, but now reality had a subtle way of reminding people they are never entirely safe. Daniel felt a pang of sorrow, not for himself, but for her. Love had turned to deceit, and deceit had carved a hollow space in all their hearts. That space could not be erased by revenge alone. Daniel took a breath, steady and deliberate, as though he had been preparing all his life for this precise moment. He stepped closer to the microphone, feeling the weight of the room's attention. One word, one accusation, one revelation could change everything. His finger itched to reach for the evidence in his pocket, to lay bare every secret, every betrayal, every lie in front of witnesses. He imagined the chaos, the shocked faces, the whispered conversations, the immediate fallout. The thrill of power was intoxicating. But he also felt something else, stronger and quieter. Clarity. He realized that true strength was not in striking back, but in controlling his own choices. Marcus had already damaged the bonds of trust, already revealed who he was through his actions. Clara had already made her decisions. Their guilt, their fear, their exposure would come in their own time. Daniel understood that intervening violently, publicly, would not fix what had been broken. It would only extend the pain and chain him to the very anger he wanted to escape. So Daniel did something unexpected. He smiled, and his voice rang clear through the room. Marcus has done tremendous work, and I want to thank him for the years we've spent building this company together. The applause was polite, supportive. Daniel's words were precise, neutral, carefully balanced. He didn't accuse, he didn't reveal, he didn't condemn. He maintained authority, calmness, and dignity. Then he added with steady confidence, "I've decided to take a step back. I will be leaving my position, and I trust the board to ensure the company continues to thrive." The room murmured in surprise. Gasps, questions, curious glances, but Daniel's expression remained unshakable. The decision was final, deliberate. He left Marcus to his own devices to face consequences in the way life would naturally deliver them. No spectacle, no public shaming. Just clarity, responsibility, and personal control. Daniel felt a release. He hadn't expected it. Wasn't a thrill of revenge. It wasn't the satisfaction of seeing others falter. It was relief, a quiet, grounding relief that came from stepping away, from choosing his path instead of reacting to theirs. Up. The burden of betrayal was heavy, but choosing his own response lightened it. Up. The storm inside him settled enough to breathe. Later that evening, alone in his apartment, Daniel reflected on what had happened. He thought about Marcus, about the arrogance and recklessness. about the personal failings that would inevitably catch up to him. He thought about Clara, about the choices she had made and the consequences she would face in her own time. But he felt no desire for dramatic confrontation. He didn't want revenge. He wanted freedom from the anger, from the past, from the entanglement of betrayal. He thought of the weeks leading up to the gala, of the sleepless nights, of the internal planning, for the balance between temptation and restraint. Each moment had tested him, forced him to confront his own morality, his own desire for control, his own limits. And in the end, he had chosen himself not in anger, not in retaliation, but in measured, deliberate strength. He had reclaimed. The power betrayal had tried to steal. Daniel considered the lessons he had learned. Betrayal cuts deep, leaves scars, and tests every measure of trust and love. Revenge may seem satisfying in the moment, but it rarely delivers peace. True power is in restraint, in deciding not to let someone else's choices dictate your life. By stepping away, Daniel preserved his integrity, his clarity, and his ability to heal. He understood that the people who wronged him would face their own reckoning, either through guilt, through consequences, or through life itself. In the following weeks, Daniel adjusted to his new life. He focused on personal growth, on rebuilding, confidence and trust in himself, and on learning from the experiences he had endured. He kept contact minimal with Clara, seeing her only when necessary, and handled business matters through formal channels, leaving Marcus to deal with the outcomes of his actions. The tension of the betrayal slowly faded, replaced by a steadier, reflective calm. Daniel's nights were quieter now. Sleep came without the previous racing of thoughts. He no longer imagined the thrill of exposing secrets or exacting revenge. Instead, he visualized freedom, peace, and clarity of mind. He recognized the lingering ache of betrayal, but it no longer defined him. He had chosen his response, and in that choice lay true strength. He sometimes wondered about Marcus, sometimes about Clara. Did they realize the depth of what they had done? Did they regret it? But he didn't need their answers. The story belonged to him now, not the past they shared, not the lies they told, not the mistakes they made. He owned his decisions and the life he would rebuild from this point forward. Daniel learned that revenge might promise satisfaction, but its satisfaction is fleeting and often destructive. He discovered that stepping away, preserving dignity, and controlling your own choices could bring lasting relief, clarity, and self-respect. The betrayal had changed him, yes, but it had also revealed a resilience he hadn't known he possessed. As Daniel looked out the window one evening, watching the city lights flicker in the distance, he felt a quiet sense of triumph, not over Marcus, not over Clara, not over betrayal, but over himself. He had faced the crossroads, the ultimate temptation to let anger and desire for revenge control him, and he had chosen a different path. One of calm, measured reflection and deliberate action. He understood finally that true justice doesn't always come from retaliation. Sometimes it comes from stepping back, from preserving your integrity, and allowing life to handle the consequences naturally. The choice to walk away was the strongest statement he could make. It was the moment that defined him, not the betrayal, not the deceit, not the potential for revenge. Daniel smiled faintly, small, private acknowledgement of his own strength. The storm had passed, but the lessons remained. He was no longer a man at the mercy of betrayal. He was a man in control of himself, and that was a power no one could take from him. The past belonged to them, the future belonged to him, and he had finally chosen the life he would live from this day forward.